Good afternoon. I'm going to review with you the plans for the zoster work group update today on the use of zoster vaccine in older adults. By way of background, as you may recall, currently the ACIP recommends the routine vaccination of all persons 60 years of age and older with one dose of herpes zoster vaccine, and that recommendation was made originally in 2006. In 2011, the FDA approved herpes zoster vaccine for the 50 to 59-year-old age group. In June of 2011, ACIP declined to recommend the vaccine for adults aged 50 to 59 and reaffirmed the current recommendation. And that was based on both the shortfall in the bulk product used to manufacture the vaccine at that point and limited data available on the long-term protection of herpes zoster vaccine. And the ACIP committed to monitor the supply issues and reconsider recommendations for adults aged 50 to 59 when an adequate and stable supply of the vaccine is assured. So for today, we'll review with you the supply and uptake of herpes zoster vaccine, the data that are now available on long-term protection from the vaccine, and we'll revisit the issue of revising recommendations to include vaccination of 50 to 59-year-olds. These are the members of our herpes zoster work group, and I would like to thank all of them for very thoughtful deliberations and thorough deliberations on the issues that we're going to present with you today. And I especially want to express my thanks to Craig Hales, our CDC DFO, who's done an outstanding job putting together the information that you'll hear shortly. I'm going to review just briefly a few key points. With respect to supply and uptake of the vaccine, Merck had some problems beginning in 2007. There were multiple years of shortfall, but we've had about 18 months now of uninterrupted vaccine supply, and we're assuming for the basis of the potential revision to the recommended target group for vaccination, we're assuming that we have a stable supply of vaccine at this point. Nonetheless, as you can see, vaccine uptake is not optimal, and if you're an optimist, you can say we've had a 900% increase from 2007, but I can also tell you, and I think you'll agree, that this is a very unsatisfactory coverage rate for adults with the vaccine at this point. So the key issues in considering revising the recommended age of vaccination include the fact that the burden of herpes zoster disease increases with age. And the primary consideration during our work group deliberations were that the vaccine should provide protection during the periods of highest incidence of herpes zoster and herpes zoster-related complications. And that's should be very familiar to you, and it's standard practice in targeting populations for vaccination recommendations. You also will hear from Merck about the results of their long-term persistence study on vaccine effectiveness 7 through 11 years after vaccination. Now I'm going to give you the spoiler here. The working group has concluded not to propose any changes to the existing recommendations for routine vaccination of persons 60 years of age and older. And the reason for this is that, again, the vaccine should be administered when it will achieve the greatest reduction in burden of herpes zoster and its complications, so it's severe postherpetic neuralgia and other complications and debilitating complications. At this time, there is insufficient evidence for the long-term protection offered by the vaccine, and therefore, persons who are vaccinated under 60 years of age may not be protected when the incidence of herpes zoster and its severe complications are highest, so that persons who are vaccinated between 50 and 59 years of age should not expect at this point to be protected when they're at the greatest risk for the severe illness related to herpes zoster. We will continue to monitor data on duration of protection as it becomes available and to evaluate the optimal age for vaccination, but at this point we reaffirm the current recommendation to vaccinate persons 60 years of age and older. and we will continue to evaluate the need for revaccination. And at this time, we're going to transition to additional slides that will expand upon the rationale for the conclusions that I just shared with you. So we'll hear from Drs. Janie Pirano and Eddie Bresnitz from Merck on the long-term persistence study in the vaccine supply. Dr. Craig Hales will go into more detail about the burden of herpes zoster disease, the efficacy and effectiveness of the vaccine in older adults, which underpins our rationale for the current recommendation. We'll hear about cost effectiveness, and although you'll see that the cost effectiveness data support our recommendation, that was not at all a major driver of our recommendation. And then finally, Dr. Hales will again review with us the considerations in more detail for the use of herpes zoster vaccine in adults 50 to 59 years of age. So I'd like now to ask our colleagues from Merck to come up and begin the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. Jeff alluded to the fact that a few years ago we had supply constraints for several years that made it difficult to provide the vaccine to the marketplace. And about in June of 2011, Jim Robinson, our vice president in our manufacturing division, stood here and actually described the complexity of the VZV manufacturing process, and at the same time outlined a strategy, a very comprehensive strategy, I might add, to deliver reliable and ample vaccine for all our VZV-containing vaccines, which include VariVax, ProQuad, and Zostavax. And I safely say and confidently say that we've actually implemented that strategy successfully. We resumed routine supply of all varicella-based vaccines in the U.S. over the last couple of years, while at the same time expanding globally, both for VariVax and Zostavax. It was around December of 2011, January 2012, when we basically returned to normal shipping of Zostavax in the marketplace here in the U.S., and since then we've shipped over 6 million doses. Most of you know that ProQuad was reintroduced in 2012, and we've maintained an uninterrupted supply of that, as well as in VariVax, which never had any supply issues in the U.S. And now, as I mentioned just a moment ago, we've expanded sales of our vaccine globally in over a dozen countries, with additional launches planned in 10 or more countries in the coming year. In addition to process changes that we implemented over the last few years, we've also invested significantly in expanding our infrastructure, thereby expanding our access and supply of Zostavax and other VZV-containing vaccines as well. And that increased capacity is basically also tied to improving reliability of the vaccine and creating redundancy to better ensure long-term supply, not just in the U.S., but globally. And we achieved a milestone this past last month where where we had FDA approval of our Durham plant for manufacturing varicella bulk. And we talked a little bit about this, or Jim did a couple of years ago, and we were really pleased by this FDA approval. I just noticed on Jeff's slide some early NHIS data that he showed there. And he indicated that we're probably not where we need to be. Just to remind people, the Healthy People 2020 target is 30%, and as of 2012, and in 2012 we had a very active promotional campaign for Zostavax, and we're still only at about 20%. I know those are preliminary data. And so I just want to remind the group, it's not just the issue of supply, but it's also issue of access and basically the ability to basically cover the vaccine, and the reimbursement process is very complex in this country for vaccine, particularly for Zostavax. So having enough supply is not adequate to basically ensure that we have appropriate uptake of this very important vaccine. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janie Pirano, who's from our Merck Research Laboratories, who's going to talk about the long-term persistence study. Janie?
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you for the opportunity today to present the data on the long-term persistence study, also known as the LTPS. This study was conducted by the Veterans Affairs Cooperative Study Program with Mike Oxman, Dr. Michael Oxman as the study chair. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to advance the slides. Okay. No, I advanced too far now. Sorry about that. Before we go into the LTPS study results, as some background information, I'm going to provide a very brief overview of the two predecessor studies to the LTPS. The shingles prevention study was the pivotal efficacy study conducted in adults 60 years of age and older that enrolled over 38,000 individuals and assessed vaccine efficacy on 3 endpoints: the incidence of herpes zoster, the incidence of postherpetic neuralgia, and the burden of illness. The median age at enrollment into the SPS was 69 years. Median follow-up time was approximately 3.1 years. The vaccine efficacy on the incidence of herpes zoster was 51%, on PHN 67%, and BOI 61%. And the study demonstrated that the benefit of vaccination persisted through the 4 years of follow-up. This is a graphical representation of those figures I just mentioned with the previous slide. Also included on this slide is the 25% pre-specified lower bound success criterion, and you can see there that each of the 3 study endpoints exceeded this criterion. The 95% confidence intervals are also provided on this slide. Okay. The short-term persistence study extended the follow-up from the shingles prevention study to approximately 8 years after vaccination. This study enrolled about 14,000 individuals. There was no hypothesis testing in the short-term persistence study, or STPS. There was a break in surveillance of herpes zoster cases from completion of the SPS and the start of the STPS. In addition, there was more follow-up time in the vaccine group than in the placebo group, and this is because placebo recipients were offered vaccine under another amendment of the shingles prevention study while the short-term persistence study was ongoing. And we'll talk about this again in terms of how it affects the LTPS. The median age at enrollment into the STPS was 73 years, with a median follow-up time of approximately 1.2 years. Data contributing to analyses were collected primarily from year 4 to year 7 post-vaccination. For the STPS time period, the vaccine efficacy on the incidence of herpes zoster was 40%, on PHN was 60%, and on herpes zoster burden of illness was 50%. In addition, pooled analyses with the SPS were also performed. The data analysis for the vaccine efficacy from each year 1 to year 7 post-vaccination, for the combined SPS and STPS studies demonstrated that the efficacy for zoster vaccine for herpes zoster burden of illness and incidence of herpes zoster was statistically significant for each year through the end of year 5. Point estimates for year 6 and year 7 suggested continued efficacy for herpes zoster burden of illness and the incidence of herpes zoster, but the results were not statistically significant except for HCBOI in year 7. There were small numbers of cases in later years that reduced the power to detect true differences. With regard to postherpetic neuralgia, the efficacy of zoster vaccine for incidence of PHN appeared to persist, but because of the small number of cases of PHN, there was not a statistically significant difference beyond 2 years post-vaccination. The LTPS extended the follow-up time from the SPS to approximately 12 years after vaccination. This study enrolled 6,867 subjects. It was descriptive in nature with no hypothesis testing. There was not an unvaccinated concurrent control group for calculation of vaccine efficacy during LTPS, and this is because, as we mentioned with regard to the STPS, the placebo recipients in the shingles prevention study were offered vaccination. So by the time the LTPS started, there were no longer any placebo recipients to serve as a control. Instead, historical control rates were estimated using 3 different methods that we'll talk about in the next slide. The primary analyses were based on the whole time interval after enrollment into LTPS, and the data contributing to the analyses were collected primarily from year 7 to year 10 post-vaccination. The information for each year time period is limited, but annual vaccine efficacy estimates are provided as supplementary information. The objectives of the study were to estimate the duration of vaccine efficacy on the incidence of herpes zoster, the incidence of postherpetic neuralgia, and the herpes zoster burden of illness. The primary safety parameter was the incidence of vaccine-related SAEs. So the LTPS was originally designed to use herpes zoster and postherpetic neuralgia incidence rates and HCBOI scores observed in the placebo group of the shingles prevention study, adjusted for subject age, as historical control rates for calculating vaccine efficacy. However, within the placebo group of the SPS and STPS, a significant increase in the risk of herpes zoster over increasing follow-up or calendar time was observed even after adjusting for this increasing age of the subjects. The control rate and the vaccine efficacy could be underestimated if it was adjusted only for age. Therefore, calculations for expected HC incidence rate for the historical placebo reference subjects were adjusted. The primary method of analysis, also known as Method 1, adjusted the SPS data for both age and calendar effects based upon this finding. Method 2, which is the most conservative of the three methods, adjusted the SPS data only for the age effect. Method 3 adjusted SPS and STPS for age and calendar effects. Of note, this increase in risk over increasing follow-up or calendar time after adjusting for increasing age was not noted when analyses were done for PHN. So the estimates of the incidence of PHN for the historical control were only adjusted for age, and there is no Method 3 analysis for PHN. So all of the results for the entire LTPS time period are included on this slide. The median age at enrollment into the LTPS was 74 years, a median follow-up time of approximately 3.9 years, and there were 263 cases of herpes zoster during this time period. For HC, the observed incidence rate was 10.3 per 1,000 person years. The primary method, I can figure out how to use this. Okay, I don't know where that's pointing to. So the primary method is 21.1%, and you can see the 95% confidence interval is represented by the lines on those bar graphs. So as expected, sensitivity method 2, which was the conservative method, gave the lowest rate for vaccine efficacy, and method 3 gave the highest rate for vaccine efficacy. With regards to postherpetic neuralgia, as I mentioned previously, there are only two methods for analyses, and you can see by the primary method the vaccine efficacy was 35.4%, and by the sensitivity method 2 it was 33%. And the incidence rate of PHN per 1,000 person years for that follow-up time was 1.3. For the herpes zoster burden of illness, the the incidence rate per 1,000 person years was 1.7. Or the score, I should say, was 1.7. The vaccine efficacy based upon the primary method was 37.3%, with the range of 29.5% to 40.5% based upon the sensitivity analyses. Did we go to the... Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try and go to the next slide. Okay. These are the results on the annual incidence of herpes zoster. In the slides that follow this, we'll also see these results for postherpetic neuralgia and burden of illness. There are a lot of numbers on these slides, and I'm going to focus your attention on just a few of these numbers. So the first thing you can notice is when you look at this by annual estimates, you can see the limited amount of data that's available in each year. This becomes particularly evident when you get to years 11 and 12. In addition, another thing I want to point out on this slide is that the estimated incidence rate of herpes zoster for the LTPS time period is lower than the observed rate from the short-term persistence study. And finally, when we look at the vaccine efficacy for the incidence of herpes zoster, we can see that the point estimates have some variability from year to year, but it's beginning at year 9 where we really see a lower numeric value compared to the other years. And next we'll look at this for postherpetic neuralgia. So the first thing to notice on this slide is the small number of cases that are contributing to analyses. So it's very important to interpret these data with caution given the limited data that are contributing. When we look at the vaccine efficacy for the incidence of postherpetic neuralgia, you can see the very wide confidence intervals associated with these point estimates, which again is a reflection of the limited amount of data. The Point estimates on the vaccine efficacy for PHN are lower in years 7 and 8 compared to some of the other years, and then do increase again in years 9 and 10. And in the next slide, we'll look at this for the burden of illness. So when looking at the HC burden of illness data, we can see that at year 6, the vaccine efficacy is lower than in prior years, and the 95% confidence interval includes 0. The point estimates then increase for the subsequent years, and the 95% confidence intervals remain above 0 through year 10 post-vaccination. And again, these data for the annual estimates in the 3 previous slides are provided as supplementary analyses and information. With regards to safety, there were no vaccine-related SAEs reported. There were a total of 399 deaths reported, none of which were determined by the study investigators to be related to the study vaccine. 5.8% of the subjects discontinued the study due to death, which is not unexpected due to the age of the cohort. The overall results suggested that Zostavax is generally well tolerated. So the limitations of the LTPS, the SPS was conducted at 22 sites, the STPS was conducted at 12 sites, and the LTPS was conducted at the same 12 sites. So we're only conducting the study at 12 of the original 22 sites. It was a descriptive study with no hypothesis testing. There was a lack of a placebo control group requiring us to estimate historical control rates based on data from prior placebo recipients. The age and calendar time effects and incidence rate were assumed from the SPS and STPS study data. And as noted on one of the previous slides, the estimated control rates for years 7 through 12 were lower than the observed rates in the placebo group for years 4, 5, and 6, which could result in an underestimate of vaccine efficacy. In addition, there were small numbers of cases when you look at the data for those annual estimate analyses. However, in summary, over the LTPS follow-up period, Zostavax did continue to reduce incidence and severity of herpes zoster, although the vaccine efficacy estimates were lower than what was seen in the overall SPS and STPS study populations. The supportive analyses on annual vaccine efficacy have limited information for each year time period of the LTPS, resulting in high year-to-year variability and generally broad confidence intervals. However, when we do look at these data, the vaccine efficacy on herpes zoster estimates were generally consistent with prior years through year 8. Again, we do have some variability in those point estimates, and we're numerically lower really starting at years 9 and 10. For post-herpetic neuralgia, again, there were small numbers of cases in each year, but the estimates that were noted on the previous slides were numerically lower in years 7 and 8 than those observed in the SPS and STPS, and then for years 9 and 10, the estimated efficacy is more consistent with what was seen in prior years. And for the herpes zoster burden of illness, the estimates were generally consistent with prior years through year 10, although again, point estimates were higher for some years than for other years, with the exception of year 6, which was numerically lower than what was observed in the SPS and the prior years in the STPS. The last few slides are acknowledgement slides. I mentioned Dr. Michael Oxman at the start of the presentation. He was a study chairman. In addition, from the VA, we should note the work of Gary Johnson and Jane Zhang. I don't have it on the slide, but Ruth Harbecki from the VA should also be acknowledged for her work on the study. Probably should have also included some of our Merck statisticians who've analyzed the data, including Xiaoming Li, Shuqi Su, and Ivan Chan. And I have one more acknowledgement slide. The Cooperative Studies Program Coordinating Center, the Data and Safety Monitoring Board, the Clinical Evaluation Committee, and our study investigators and study participants who really dedicated a lot of their time to this study. So I think we're taking questions. We're pausing for questions either for myself or for Dr. Bresnitz.
Yes, Dr. Plotkin.
You know, if I have a conflict of interest, and that is that I have received this vaccine. But if we were talking about any other vaccine, we would be looking at immunological data. Now, the correlate of protection for zoster is a cellular response, as measured by ELISpot. But at least one could look at the GP ELISA, which had a statistical correlation with efficacy. And although you don't have a placebo population, you can compare the results with the results before vaccination. So I would like to know what the immunologic data are for this vaccine with specimens taken long after immunization. And I can't resist also commenting to the committee with respect to the discussion of the pneumococcal vaccine that we saw no data on opsonophagocytic responses, which might, a functional response, which might influence our judgment as to which schedule to use.
Immunogenicity data were not collected as part of the long-term persistence study. The data that we had went out from the shingles prevention study through month 36 post-vaccination and was already starting to show decline in both GP-ELISA and ELISpot data. We did conduct with two collaborators who had participated in the LTPS a booster study, and when we looked at the geometric mean titers for individuals who've been vaccinated approximately 10 years earlier in the shingles prevention study compared to individuals who were age matched, so 70 years of age and above, their baseline geometric mean titers were very similar.
Dr. Plotkin, before you sit down, Larry just passed this to me, and I just wanted to make a mention that on Saturday, the 26th, Dr. Plotkin is going to be receiving the Caspar Wistar Medal of Achievement for an individual who has had significant impact on global health. So just our acknowledgement to Dr. Plotkin. So I apologize for that interruption. Are there other questions? Seeing none, I guess we move on to the next presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Craig Hales, the CDC lead for the herpes zoster work group. And in this presentation, I will review the burden of zoster disease and the efficacy and effectiveness of zoster vaccine in older adults. Characteristics of the burden of zoster and its complications, along with the results from several studies on the short and long-term vaccine efficacy and effectiveness, were key considerations in the work group's deliberations on the use of zoster vaccine in older adults. All right, sorry about that. I will begin with an overview of the burden of zoster disease in adults, and then I will review the short and long-term efficacy and effectiveness of the zoster vaccine. Acute zoster is characterized by localized and painful rash. Zoster is usually self-limited, but pain associated with acute disease can be disabling. Postherpetic neuralgia, or PHN, manifests as mild to excruciating pain that persists months to years after resolution of the rash, and is the most common complication of zoster. Chronic pain associated with PHN can disrupt sleep, mood, work, and activities of daily living, adversely impacting quality of life and leading to social withdrawal and depression. Secondary bacterial infections of the skin may occur, and ophthalmic involvement can lead to ocular complications, including permanent visual impairment. Serious neurologic complications include palsies, meningitis, and stroke syndromes. Several studies, such as this population-based study of zoster incidence in Olmsted County, Minnesota, show a rapid increase in zoster incidence beginning in the 5th decade of life and continuing beyond age 80. In this study, zoster incidence was 6 per thousand in person years in 60 to 69-year-olds, almost doubling to 11 per thousand person years in adults 80 years of age and older. Not only does the incidence of zoster increase with age, but the risk for developing zoster-related complications also increases with age. This slide shows the proportion of people with zoster who develop postherpetic neuralgia, defined here as pain continuing at least 90 days after rash onset. The results shown here are from the same studies in the previous slide, and other studies show similar results. Among persons with zoster, those 60 to 69 years of age had double the risk of developing PHN than those younger than 60. The risk of PHN doubles again in persons 80 years of age and older compared to 60 to 69-year-olds. In persons 80 years of age and older, 20% of zoster cases progress to PHN. The same study also showed that non-pain complications, including ocular and neurologic complications, secondary skin infections, and disseminated zoster, were more common in older age groups. The shingles prevention study measured interference with activities of daily living, or ADLs, caused by zoster. The study measured the mean severity of interference with the following 7 ADLs over 6 months following onset of zoster: general activity, mood, walking ability, work, relations with others, sleep, and enjoyment of life. The burden of interference with ADLs increased with age, with adults 80 years of age or older having over twice the burden of interference with ADLs compared to adults 60 to 69. A study from Connecticut showed that population-based rates of hospitalization increased several-fold from age 60 to age 85 and older. The study found that 3/4 of all zoster-related hospitalizations occurred in persons 60 years of age and older. Other studies of zoster-related hospitalization show similar results. Vaccine efficacy is defined as the reduction of disease in vaccinated persons relative to unvaccinated persons under optimum conditions, best measured in a double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled clinical trial. Vaccine effectiveness is reduction in disease in vaccinated persons relative to unvaccinated persons under real-world conditions, typically measured in observational studies. 2 studies have evaluated the short-term efficacy of the zoster vaccine in adults 60 years of age and older. The Shingles Prevention Study, or SPS, was a randomized controlled trial with over 38,000 subjects spanning 1 to 4 years after vaccination. The Short-Term Persistent Sub-Study, or STPS, was a continuation of SPS and a subset of approximately 14,000 subjects who were followed 4 to 7 years after vaccination. For prevention of zoster, SPS found a vaccine efficacy of 51% 1 to 4 years after vaccination. The Short-Term Persistent Study found an efficacy of 40% during years 4 to 7 after vaccination. The SPS showed 67% efficacy for prevention of PHN 1 to 4 years after vaccination, and the STPS showed 60% efficacy during years 4 to 7 after vaccination, but was not statistically significant. The SPS showed that short-term vaccine efficacy for preventing zoster in persons 60 years of age and older declines the older the person is at the time of vaccination. The Shingles Prevention Study evaluated vaccine efficacy against PHN in subjects who developed zoster post-vaccination. Vaccinated subjects who developed zoster were less likely to progress to postherpetic neuralgia compared to placebo subjects. However, this effect was seen only in subjects 70 years of age or older. Vaccine efficacy for the prevention of PHN in subjects with zoster was 55% in 70 to 79-year-olds and 26% in those 80 years of age and older. Data on duration of protection against zoster from the combined SPS and STPS studies show a decrease in vaccine efficacy in the first year after vaccination with relatively stable point estimates through year 7. However, total person years of follow-up time decreased over the combined study period, and by year 6, the lower 95% confidence interval for vaccine efficacy crosses 0. Therefore, vaccine efficacy beyond year 5 is uncertain. Data from the same study assessed the efficacy for prevention of PHN, defined as zoster-related pain lasting at least 90 days. Because of the small number of PHN cases, estimates for vaccine efficacy are very unstable and not significant beyond year 2 after vaccination. Therefore, it's difficult to conclude how long the vaccine protects against PHN, although point estimates for vaccine efficacy throughout the period suggest continued protection. 2 observational studies evaluated vaccine effectiveness in adults 60 years of age and older. The first is a study in a health maintenance organization, or HMO, in over 300,000 individuals, with a mean follow-up time of approximately 1.5 years. Vaccine effectiveness was also evaluated in a study of 766,000 Medicare beneficiaries with a mean follow-up time of approximately 2 years. The two studies found vaccine effectiveness of 55% and 48% for the prevention of zoster. The Medicare study showed 59% effectiveness for preventing PHN. The HMO study showed that the vaccine was 65% effective for the prevention of zoster-related hospitalizations. In contrast to the SPS, which showed decreasing vaccine efficacy with age at the time of vaccination, the HMO study showed similar effectiveness regardless of age. The most likely explanation for the differences between these two studies is the way cases were ascertained. Active case finding in the SPS allowed ascertainment of all cases of zoster, even mild cases when the individual might not have otherwise sought health care. The observational study, however, found zoster cases only when an individual sought care for zoster. Therefore, the results from the HMO study show stable vaccine effectiveness for persons 60 years of age or older for preventing clinically significant zoster. There has been one study of vaccine efficacy in adults 50 to 59 years of age. This randomized controlled trial, called ZEST for zoster efficacy and safety trial, followed over 22,000 subjects for a mean of 1.3 years. This study showed a vaccine efficacy of 70% for the prevention of zoster. Efficacy for prevention of postherpetic neuralgia was not studied because subjects who developed zoster were followed for only 21 days after rash onset. This graph shows short-term vaccine efficacy for prevention of zoster from the ZEST study in 50 to 59-year-olds and the shingles prevention study in adults 60 years of age and older. Vaccine efficacy for preventing zoster is higher in 50 to 59-year-olds compared with 60 to 69-year-olds. However, results from the two studies are not directly comparable because mean follow-up time from the ZEST study in 50 to 59-year-olds was less than half that of the SPS study vaccinated at 60 years of age and older. Dr. Perino presented the results from the long-term persistent study, or LTPS, in subjects vaccinated at 60 years of age and older. The LTPS was an observational study that followed a subset of almost 7,000 vaccinated subjects from the original shingles prevention study from 7 to 12 years after vaccination. However, the study had a major limitation in that it had no concurrent control group. It is also worth noting that the vaccinated subjects were unblinded to their vaccination status. Vaccine effectiveness was calculated from a statistical model using zoster and PHN incidence from historical controls. This graph shows zoster incidence in vaccine and placebo groups in the SPS and the STPS, and the vaccine group in the LTPS from 1 to 11 years after vaccination. The solid yellow line along the bottom shows zoster incidence in the vaccinated group in all three studies. The solid green line along the top shows zoster incidence in the placebo group in the combined SPS and STPS. The placebo group was offered vaccination at the completion of STPS. In order to predict what the zoster incidence would be for an unvaccinated cohort for years 7 to 11, the investigators used a statistical model based on the placebo group of the SPS, accounting for increasing age and the effective calendar time. The red dotted line shows this predicted incidence, and the vaccine effectiveness was calculated using these estimates. The model predicts that zoster incidence would be the same in the vaccinated and unvaccinated group by year 11, indicating that no protection from the vaccine would remain. However, it is impossible to know whether or not this model accurately predicts what zoster incidence would be if investigators continued to follow the placebo group over the entire study period. Therefore, calculation of VE using this projection is suspect. And now, Dr. Ismael Ortega Sanchez will present the decision and cost effectiveness analysis.
Good afternoon. Nothing like vaccine economics to wake you up, right? My name is Ismael Ortega Sanchez. I'm a senior health economist at the National Center of Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. Today I will talk about the cost effectiveness of herpes zoster vaccination in the United States. This is a revised and updated analysis previously presented to this committee and to the working group. First, the usual disclaimers annotated here. Let me remark that following ACIP guidance on health economic studies, this analysis went through a blind peer review process by CDC economists, and some of their comments were included in these slides. Today I will talk first about the policy questions that we address in the economic analysis, the decision and the cost effectiveness model, the selected parameters and assumptions that we included, the base case results, the sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis. In the interest of time, I will focus more on key parts of the analysis and results and leave others out. At the end of your handouts are additional slides that deal with the specific details in the methods and results section. If interested, I will be happy to discuss them afterwards. This analysis was conducted in order to address the policy question: what is the optimal age to recommend a single dose of zoster vaccine in adults 50 or older? There are at least two ways to look at this question. The first one will be from the public health perspective. If our objective was to minimize the burden of zoster disease, at what age would vaccination have the greatest population impact? The second approach is from the economic perspective. At what age would vaccination produce the greatest value? In the coming slides, I will show you how we addressed each of these two questions. For both approaches, we compared the projected cost effectiveness of 3 routine herpes zoster vaccination strategies, as well as the non-vaccination program. The modeling approach used a cohort-based decision analysis. We focus only in the representative sample of the United States population, adult population, specifically the immunocompetent adults 50 years of age and older. In the analytical horizon, when we measure the costs and benefits of the vaccination program, we follow the cohorts from 50 years old till 99 years old, but we follow using the specific mean life expectancy. We will use a societal perspective for this analysis. For this purpose, we resort to a previously constructed decision tree model to compare the 4 strategies. What we have here in the slide is a fraction of the decision tree model. To calculate the number of shingle cases as well as the number of PHN and non-pain complications, the model includes notes that describes herpes zoster disease, reactivation, and specific outcomes. To deal with key uncertainties, the model is also designed with a Monte Carlo simulation. The simulation allowed us to calculate not only the most likely or base case estimates for health benefits and costs, but also the ranges around these estimates. Because of the nature of herpes zoster disease, our primary outcome estimated in each strategy would be the number of quality adjusted life years saved and the cost per quality saved. A number of secondary outcomes are also estimated from this model, specifically the number of cases of herpes zoster prevented and the cost per case of herpes zoster prevented. Also, the number of cases of PHN prevented and the cost per case of PHN prevented. We estimate also the number of needed to vaccinate to avert specific outcomes, such as the number needed to avert a herpes zoster case or a PHN. Once the core of the model is set, we fed it with the diverse data and feasible assumptions. Some of them have been already presented to you by my previous speakers. Efforts were made to include the best available data. We updated data on the epidemiology of the disease, age-specific when they were available, the healthcare resource utilization and cost, the indirect cost, the vaccine characteristics, and the quality of life during herpes zoster disease and complications. In the next slides, I will briefly describe some of this data. Some of them have already been presented to you. To briefly review the epidemiology data, this slide shows the herpes zoster incidence rates by age group as reported in publications during the last 30 years. Likewise, we fitted probability distributions to arrange values of herpes zoster disease-associated complications to incorporate the variability observed in the age and type-specific complications as shown in this slide. This slide presents the vaccine characteristics used in the model, and I believe that you would agree with me that the key word is initial. Initial efficacy for shingles and PHN and the associated adverse events for vaccination. Based on data from the studies presented before, the SPS, the STPS, and the long-term persistent study for vaccine efficacy, we model the waning of vaccine efficacy in time. This waning is normalized as a residual vaccine efficacy. So it starts with 100 and it drops down to 0. And it's used for all the age groups. But with the initial vaccine efficacy for shingles and PHN and the residual for waning, the model estimates the incidence of herpes zoster after vaccination. There are a number of other key assumptions that were used in this analysis. We accounted, for example, for the decrements of quality of life among people with herpes zoster disease with and without back complications. There were at least 3 components in the calculation of the QALYs. One is the duration of pain, the pain intensity, and the health utility from various health states. We weighted all of this by the proportion of people who suffered these specific scenarios. Among other base case assumptions are, we don't include any recurrence of herpes zoster. We use age-specific health-related quality of life corrections. We include direct and indirect cause of shingles and PHN for the acute phase of herpes zoster, for the non-pay complications, for the long-term or the PHN, and also work loss and productivity loss. Work loss for time loss due to the disease, and for premature death when it's productivity. In this slide, we describe the cost of the vaccination included in the model. We use the assumption of the coverage assumed is 100%. The vaccine cost base is based on the 2013 private sector prices, basically $165 per dose, plus the adverse events cost, which is age-specific, the $20 base case administration cost, which goes around $190 per vaccinee. We conduct analysis following recommendations on the United States Panel on Cost Effectiveness and Health for Health and Medicine. Earlier, I presented to you 2 policy questions that we are trying to address in this analysis. The first is, at what age would vaccination have the greatest population impact? To do this analysis, we follow 4 cohorts. non-vaccinated at all, vaccinated at age 50, vaccinated at age 60, and vaccinated at age 70. All of them starting at age 50. In other words, we evaluate the burden of zoster in a cohort of a person 50 years of age who complete their lives unvaccinated and compare this burden to the burden of zoster in a cohort of persons 50 years of age who complete their lives being vaccinated at either age 50 or age 60 or age 70. What I want to emphasize here is that the difference in terms of shingle prevention can be seen from what is described in the red line as the non-vaccination program versus the vaccination at age 50 or age 70 and age 60. And as we can see, all of them seem to be in the same ballpark, but with emphasis that the vaccination at age 6 seems to prevent more shingle cases when we look at the cumulative number of shingles. Note also that this analysis, in this analysis, a portion of individuals that in that cohort of 1,050,000 years old adults will die before reaching the age at which they would have been vaccinated. In fact, 1 million people will be less than 50% when they reach age 70. In this slide, we estimate the cumulative number of PHN cases in a cohort of persons 50 years of age who complete their lives unvaccinated, which is the red line, and compare this burden of PHN numbers in cohort of persons 50 years of age who complete their lives being vaccinated at either age 50, which is the blue line, at age 60, the green, or at age 70, the yellow. Unlike the previous one, here we see that the much bigger impact is seen when we are vaccinating people at age 70. And as we can see by the vertical distance between the red and the yellow line. Here, we are summarizing some of the results for each one of the strategies, the number of outcomes prevented, and the number of resource utilization prevented. As we can see, except for work hours, estimates in health outcomes and resource utilization are higher when waiting till 70 to vaccinate, followed by waiting till 60 to vaccinate. Being vaccinated at 50, the one that produces smaller numbers compared to the other ones. But in general, we can see that the prevention shown in proportions here are very low. Now I'm going to switch to the second approach. In the remaining results slides, we will shift to the second policy question. At what age would vaccination produce the greatest value? The approach to this analysis is a little bit different. We asked the question, if we have 1 million doses of vaccine, at what age would you administer it in order to get the greatest benefit? In this analysis, the follow-up begins at either age 50, 60, and 70. So we have 3 cohorts starting, all of them at the same time. One cohort of 1 million people aged 50, one cohort of 1 million people at age 60, and at age 70, another cohort. That cohort could be vaccinated or not. The savings in cost and quality for vaccination compared to the vaccination program are shown here, and I want to call your attention that these numbers are in thousands and discounted at 3%. Again, what we see is that savings are much bigger when we are vaccinated at the cohort of adults 70 years of age versus vaccinating a cohort of 1 million adults 60 years of age, and followed by vaccinating a cohort adults 50 years of age at 1,050,000 years of age. Excuse me. That is the same pattern that is shown also when we are analyzing the number of QALYs saved. All of them are being discounted at 3%. When we see the cost of vaccination program, we can see the specific items that are being presented here for the dose of the administration, the local reaction, and the fever and systemic, and the total cost for vaccination 1 million cohort. Vaccinated at age 50, it's approximately 3 million more than vaccinated at age 60 or 70. And that is mainly because of the local and systemic reactions, mostly due to the different rates of these adverse events included in the model. Once we consider vaccination costs, we calculate, following the United States panel on cost-effective analysis recommendations, the net costs and the cost-effectiveness ratios, specifically the cost per QALY saved. This slide presents the cost-effectiveness summary by strategy using the societal perspective. As we can see, vaccinated at age 70 results in approximately $38,000 per QALY saved, whereas vaccinated at age 50 is approximately 7 times bigger, $271,000 per QALY saved. Also, when we estimate the average number needed to vaccinate by strategy for each of these outcomes listed on your left-hand side, we see basically the same pattern. We conducted a number of sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis, all of them trying to deal with the uncertainties in the parameters that we have been using and the data that has been incorporated into the model. In this particular presentation, I will focus mostly on the scenario analysis of 4 important variables: the duration of vaccine efficacy, the vaccine efficacy for PHN for 50 and 59 years old, the patient perspective for QALYs, and the vaccine effectiveness for prevention of herpes zoster. The duration of vaccine efficacy is taking the data from the upper and lower 95th percentile confidence interval from the studies on vaccine efficacy that have been presented before, and assumes the same for all age groups. So the difference between this slide and the previous one that has been presented is basically the red and the blue lines that are describing the high and low, which are also the normalization of the residual vaccine efficacy included in the model. I want to also mention that for the vaccine efficacy for PHN in 50 and 59 years old, since we don't have any results for this one, we assume that the same efficacy reported for PHN in 60 and 69 years old is being used for the 50 and 59. And in the case of patient perspective for QALYs, using the data reported in social utility evaluation project for a study conducted by Harvard and CDC, there were 2 groups of people that were, from which the preference for specific scenarios for herpes zoster were surveyed, and their preference were elucidated. One of them was the community, which is the one that's being used for the societal perspective, and the other one was the group of patients. So we, being the patients a little bit more, let's say that, an educated guess of, providing an educated guess about the scores, basically the results that is presented there are results that are much more sensitive to the specific scenarios in terms of measuring the scores of QALYs. And the vaccine effectiveness for prevention of herpes zoster, the observational study that is used there is the vaccine effectiveness for prevention of herpes zoster is the one that was used for an observational study in NHMO. With this one, we can see some of the results that were analyzed in these scenarios. As we can see, those are compared to the base case scenario for the three strategies for vaccinated at age 50, age 60, and at age 70. Duration of vaccine efficacy, when we are using the lower bound, increases significantly the cost per quality for across all of them, but increases more in vaccinated at age 50. The duration of vaccine efficacy decreases also the cost per quality across all the strategies, but it has an asymmetric impact compared to the lower. The vaccine efficacy for PHN in 50 and 59 years old decreases the cost per quality for the 50 years old, preserves the other ones basically in the same ballpark. And the patient perspective for qualities, which, as I said, is more sensitive to the specific pain and suffering, decreases all of them, but not so much. And when we talk about also the vaccine effectiveness for herpes zoster, which is a post-implementation study, the cost per quality were also changed because they presented lower vaccine effectiveness than the ones that were reported in the clinical trials. The study limitations are, a few of them included in this slide. The uncertainty duration of vaccine protection against herpes zoster and PHN is the main one. There are limitations in the long-term persistent study results due to the lack of concurrent control groups. There is also longer protection against PHN could increase the attractiveness of earlier vaccination, which is something that is also not well defined. The duration of protection in more than 60 years olds assumes for all age. That is one of the limitations in terms of vaccine efficacy and duration of vaccine efficacy. Quality loss due to mild, moderate, and severe adverse events among vaccine recipients are not included. Including this could increase attractiveness of later vaccination. Herpes zoster incident rates may be increasing over time. This may increase attractiveness of later vaccination. And uncertainty in quality loss due to herpes zoster and its complications also can affect results for our policy questions in any direction. Results or of a scenario analysis increase confidence somewhat. I will go straight to the conclusions for interest of time. So what we can say is that from the results of our study, we have seen a substantially greater reduction of disease burden, healthcare utilization, and cost, which are achieved with vaccination at age 70 than at age 60 compared to vaccination at age 50. Results were robust based on the magnitude of the difference among vaccination strategies, consistency of public health and economic perspectives, consistency of results from scenario analysis. And let me say you that following what has been already published in the literature in terms of cost effectiveness for herpes zoster from different countries and different different perspectives, these conclusions are consistent with those found in other published analyses. Finally, let me thank all the people that helped in putting together these slides, the group at the Division of Viral Diseases at NCIRD, and the working group of the ACIP. Thank you.
Let me see if there's any questions for this. Dr. Jenkins?
So I just wondered the differences by gender, whether, the utilization, health utilization for people at that end of the spectrum, and also the mortality rate differential by gender. Is that likely to create any differences in this kind of analysis?
I'm quite sure it will create some differences. But that's not the question we have been analyzing in this analysis. We certainly can approach the problem using differential models based on gender, because we know that it is sometimes the incidence for women are increased much higher than the incidence for men. But I don't think we have a specific result in this moment.
And Dr. Kemp?
I apologize if I missed this, because it's
Yeah.
getting kind of late. But I understand that, I think that you are making assumptions that the efficacy is the same between 50 to 59 and 60 to 69. But what are you doing? Clearly, a lot of the data suggests efficacy is not the same at 70. And so what were you using different efficacy in your model for the 70 plus?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
there is in fact one slide that is describing the efficacy for each specific age group. Let me go to. Both of them are based on the randomized controlled trials published.
Okay. Well, for example, I got confused. You know, there was an HMO study with looking at longer term effects that perhaps was a little deceptive.
Yeah.
And you used that study rather than the other one that showed more dramatic changes with age. That's one of the things I wanted to question, because one of the other speakers made the point that the HMO study was perhaps not as accurate.
And you are correct, because it was an observational study. What I probably didn't clarify enough is that for the base case analysis, we use the data from the randomized controlled trials.
Okay.
We use it for the scenario analysis, which would be part of some sort of like a sensitivity analysis, the observational study published by the HMO.
Okay.
So in order to see if how the results from the base case scenario, and that's one of the slides
Okay.
at the end is showing, and you can see the difference between the base case scenario and the HMO, and on those when they are using the HMO data.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Then I think let's move on to the last presentation by Dr. Hales.
The herpes zoster work group considered the epidemiology of zoster, short-term and long-term vaccine efficacy and effectiveness, as well as results from the decision and cost-effectiveness analysis in its deliberations on use of the vaccine in 50 to 59-year-olds. We have seen that the results from several studies show that the burden of zoster increases rapidly after age 50. Not only does the incidence of zoster itself increase with age, but of those who develop zoster, the following also increase with age: the proportion of zoster cases progressing to postherpetic neuralgia and other non-pain complications, interference with activities of daily living, and the rate of zoster-related hospitalizations. The work group concluded that vaccination should continue to protect older adults during periods of high risk for zoster and its complications. A woman who is vaccinated at age 50 can expect to live another 33 years on average. A 60-year-old woman can expect to live another 24 years, and a 70-year-old woman another 16 years. The younger a person is at the time of vaccination, the longer period of time the vaccine needs to provide protection against zoster and its sequelae. The work group concluded that the herpes zoster vaccine provides protection against zoster and zoster-related complications in adults 60 years of age and older. Vaccine effectiveness from large observational studies is consistent with vaccine efficacy from randomized controlled trials. Evidence from RTCs show that efficacy against zoster lasts at least 5 years. The vaccine is also efficacious against zoster in adults 50 to 59 years of age based on a large randomized controlled trial with a mean follow-up time of 1.3 years. However, there's no evidence available on vaccine efficacy for preventing PHN or other complications in 50 to 59-year-olds, and there's no evidence on duration of protection for persons vaccinated at 50 to 59 years of age. The long-term persistence study showed waning protection over 11 years. However, the work group concluded that due to the lack of a concurrent control group, data from LTPS are insufficient to determine duration of protection. Therefore, effectiveness of zoster vaccine administered to persons 60 years of age and older for preventing zoster beyond 5 years remains uncertain. The results of the decision and cost-effectiveness analysis showed that a substantially greater reduction of disease burden, healthcare utilization, and costs is achieved with vaccination of older adults who have higher incidence of zoster and zoster-related complications. The analysis shows that the cost per QALY saved is high with vaccination at age 50 because of limited impact on prevention of severe disease. Workgroup members were in agreement not to propose changes to existing recommendation for routine vaccination of persons 60 years of age and older. The rationale for this conclusion is as follows. Zoster vaccine administration should be timed to achieve the greatest reduction in burden of zoster and its complications. There is insufficient evidence for long-term protection offered by the zoster vaccine, and persons vaccinated under 60 years of age may not be protected when the incidence of zoster and its complications are highest. The workgroup also recognized that some 50 to 59-year-olds may wish to be vaccinated. The vaccine is approved for use in 50 to 59-year-olds. Therefore, providers can still offer the vaccine to adults in this age group. However, providers should counsel persons who are vaccinated under 60 years of age that the duration of protection offered by the vaccine is uncertain. Therefore, they may not be protected when the incidence of zoster and its complications are highest. The workgroup also discussed the potential role of revaccination. The workgroup reviewed partial results on safety and immunogenicity of a second dose of the vaccine, but no data on efficacy are available. Because duration of protection offered by the vaccine is uncertain, the need for revaccination is not clear. The workgroup also noted that a second dose of the vaccine is not licensed. The workgroup plans to continue to monitor data on duration of protection as it becomes available, evaluate the optimal age for vaccination, and evaluate the need for revaccination. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions now.
Are there any questions? Just one quick question here. Can you inform us on any trials going on at this point in time for a second dose or a revaccination?
Maybe I'll ask Dr. Bresnitz to address that.
There is a booster dose study that is currently ongoing, conducted with 2 of our investigators from the shingles prevention study, from the long-term persistent study. So it's safety and immunogenicity data and the results for the week 6 time period for the GP-ELISA, which was the primary objective of the study, are available on clinicaltrials.gov and show non-inferiority in terms of an immune response for the booster dose recipients compared to first-time vaccinees who are of the same age. So that's the study we have, safety and immunogenicity. With regards to additional studies to evaluate the duration of vaccine protection, there is a study that's being conducted by our epidemiology group in conjunction with Kaiser Permanente, looking at the duration of protection. They are following individuals 50 years of age and older for 10 years or so after vaccination to assess duration of protection. So that will be a database study conducted through our epidemiology group.
And in terms of the revaccination, at what interval are you looking at?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
In terms of studies on revaccination,
So
what type of not duration, but period after the first?
Yes, so the booster dose study was conducted at 10 years after a first vaccination in the shingles prevention study. I should also mention that preliminary results are available from interferon gamma ELISpot. That was also performed as part of the immunogenicity assays in the study. The GP-ELISA is the primary objective, but the data that we have currently available on the ELISpot is supporting the data from the GP-ELISA.
Thank you. Dr. Pickering.
Yeah, do you know enough data, or are there enough data about recurrences of zoster to have that figure into your age recommendations or your cost effectiveness?
We didn't We didn't figure it into our cost effectiveness analysis because we didn't think that it would change the results according to the question that we were asking, because because we do not have a lot of data on recurrence, so we decided not to include that in the model.
Dr. Harrison.
So if I understood correctly, the immunogenicity data at 10 years suggests return to baseline, and that's what our imperfect observational analyses are suggesting as well in terms of protection. So doesn't it seem like at 10 years we basically have no protection?
Well, if I can just clarify, even if you go back to the shingles prevention study and look at the later time points for periods that you have efficacy data beyond 36 months, at 36 months the GP ELISA was already starting to return to baseline. So it appears that is returning to baseline earlier than the vaccine efficacy that you're seeing.
So we considered the results from the long-term persistence study, and as we showed, I think that it shows the possibility of waning over 10 years or 10 or more years. But because there was no concurrent control group in that study, we didn't feel that it was strong enough evidence to tell us that the vaccine efficacy is indeed waning, and it doesn't tell us how many years of protection there is. So in order to, for example, consider revaccination, we would need to have stronger data on the duration, on better data on the duration of protection.
I see a comment up at the microphone.
Yeah, hi, Ed Bresnik from Merck. A couple of comments. First, on the cost effectiveness analysis, we're just seeing this for the first time, so very interesting, a lot of great work done there, and we're looking forward to actually looking at it in more detail. I do want to point out that this is modeling, and there are a number of assumptions that are in there that one could change those assumptions and may change the sort of the calculations that are done. For example, the uptake of the vaccine as being 100%, we know just looking at the NHIS data that it's not 100%, and it's more like perhaps 6% a year. And there are other assumptions that one could basically model and get somewhat different results. The other thing I want to comment on is the sort of the last statement that Craig had up there about physicians may wanting to counsel their patients about delaying getting the vaccine. That's basically what that recommendation would be, or essentially advising them perhaps not to get the vaccine. Craig also showed incidence rates by age group, but what wasn't shown was that 20% of herpes zoster cases in this country occur in that 50 to 59 population on an annual basis, about 200,000 individuals. And those individuals, perhaps their risk of, not perhaps, but we know their risk of PHN is not as high as it is in an older population. But when they have acute zoster, their pain is the same as somebody who's 60 or 65 or 70 or older. It's that prolonged pain that perhaps is different in two populations. And younger individuals do get prolonged pain as well, just not as frequently. We also have heard about the efficacy of the vaccine in this population of 50 to 59. And it's substantially higher than when you get into the older population. So we know we have an efficacious vaccine in that population, and the safety profile is really no different, essentially. And finally, it's a little bit unusual, I think, for, I don't know if it's a recommendation, but a statement to say that physicians may want to counsel their patients against getting the vaccine because we don't know the durability of the vaccine. There are many vaccines that are newly licensed, or there's a new indication for the vaccine where we don't know the durability of the vaccine, and we don't say you should wait to basically benefit the vaccine because it might be a higher benefit in the future. What we do is we offer the vaccine, we see what happens, and then perhaps based on epidemiologic data, we revise our policy recommendations. So by adopting that kind of a statement, we're basically saying to people, don't get vaccinated and be at risk for getting herpes zoster.
Thank you. I think that the statement that we have certainly is not intended to tell people not to get the vaccine, but to make people aware who are 50 to 59 of the risks and benefits of getting vaccinated at an early age, given that their highest risk for zoster and complications will be higher later in life. And Jeff, would you like to make another comment?
Well, I would just add to that, if we knew who is going to get herpes zoster at age 50 to 59, then your statement would make a lot of sense. We could say, you're destined to get zoster the next 10 years, maybe it makes sense for you to get vaccinated, but considering the whole population and that the burden of severe zoster, post-herpetic neuralgia, and debilitating disease is going to be at the older age groups, and we only have one shot at this time to prevent herpes zoster and its related complications, we need to focus that intervention on the period when the risk is greater, which would be persons over 60 years of age.
And one other response about the large burden of zoster disease in 50 to 59-year-olds is that, and this comes out with the economic model, we see that when you're just looking at zoster cases, that whether you're vaccinated at 50, 60, or 70, that they're similar, they're close together, but because the complications from zoster, PHN, and related healthcare utilization, pain, quality loss, all of these increase rapidly after age 60, and that's why we're seeing this large difference between 50 compared to 60 and 70. But it is true that there are a large number of cases of zoster in 50 to 59-year-olds, but they're not as severe as in older patients.
Dr. Campos-Edcoat.
I am supportive of the action recommended, which is to take no action at this point in time. I say that first because some of the questions and points I'm going to make kind of sound like I'm not, okay? But I am troubled a little bit by some of the inconsistencies that we're applying here that we haven't applied elsewhere. You know, this is, again, a discrepancy with the FDA, and we've just stated in a previous discussion we don't like to do that. We have approved other vaccines in the past without knowing how long the duration of protection would be, and then we say we'll find out with time, and if we need to do a booster, we'll do it, or a second dose, we will, and we'll handle that as time comes. So we've done that in the past. And all these assumptions here were made that there's not going to be a second vaccine, which I think we've all kind of assumed if you start vaccinated at age 50, there's probably going to be a second shot sometime. The other thing that bothers me is that 20% adherence rate at age 60 to 70. And that's the reason for that, I think, is because this vaccine is not covered by a lot of private insurance companies. It's covered by Medicare under some strange reason under Part D, which puts up a tremendous barrier for people to get the vaccine in the office. If we recommend it, it's now going to be covered through the ACA at age 50, therefore doing away with the potential for a disparity based on income, because wealthier people will be able to pay for it at age 50, those who aren't as wealthy won't. And I'm just kind of wondering if we wouldn't get really better results by having higher rates of vaccine acceptance between age 50 and 60 versus a lower rate after age 60. So I'm just mentioning that for you to consider in the future, and give some thought to that. So again, I think at this point in time I'm comfortable not countering your recommendation, but I do think there are some aspects of this that are troubling me a little bit.
Dr. Schuchat.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate that for those 60 to 65 or those 60 and up with private insurance who aren't focusing on Medicare, it is covered under the Affordable Care Act with no co-pays and no deductibles when given in an in-network provider. So while I think many people are frustrated about the challenges of Medicare Part D for vaccines and the zoster barriers, now that we do have supply over that as a barrier taken care of, it's good to get the word out that people with insurance at 60 don't have to worry about the copays and deductibles for this pretty expensive vaccine that is routinely recommended.
There's one other point I wanted to make, that another inconsistency. While the rate is higher the older you get, the rate at 50 of zoster was 5 per 1,000. And we vaccinate against a number of diseases far rarer than that. So,
Just by way of follow-up, they're good points. We're seeing this vaccine is primarily used to prevent the complications of zoster, the severe complications, not just zoster per se. So the severe postherpetic neuralgia and other debilitating complications, which are more frequent in the older age groups. Right now, we don't know the duration of protection. There's no booster dose studies being planned, and we're basing our recommendation on the fact that we have one opportunity to prevent zoster-associated illness, severe zoster-associated illness, and what's the best time to do that. If we, this is just using the information that's available today to us to make the best recommendation possible. We're very open to reconsidering, and we will continue to evaluate data as it becomes available, and immunogenicity, potential booster doses, and refocusing the strategy. But at this point, based on the available data, it seems like where the money is vaccinating the older adults.
I think it's important just to keep in mind, too, if you look at any of the demographic projections in this country, it's the over 65 population which is just exploding. And they're going to be living longer, living, I think, healthier, having higher expectations in terms of that health care as time goes on, and especially if those individuals are more prone to debilitating. In my practice, the people I take care of who have the debilitation from zoster are not the people, and I see zoster all the way from age 8 recently all the way, and one of my co-workers was zoster now in her 30s, but the people who have the problems, in my experience, and who are hospitalized are almost always elder and have really significant issues. Dr. Reingold.
Well, I think particularly given what you say about the future demographic trends in the United States, I think, I don't know if ACIP makes recommendations to manufacturers, but I'm surprised we don't have more studies planned to look at the effect of a second dose. To me, that's surprising, and I would hope that somebody's going to do those studies.
Point well taken. Other comment? Dr. Bennett.
Yeah, I just wondered if, I know this is not really our concern, but I'm just curious about whether there's work going on to increase coverage, because I find this coverage data shocking. This is a vaccine that whenever I tell anyone about this vaccine, they are, running to their doctor. People do not want to get zoster. And I just don't understand why the coverage is as bad as it is. I understand I know about the over 65 problem, but what about the 60 to 65-year-olds? I mean, their coverage is bad too.
Part of that is that many physicians don't carry this in their offices because of the over 65 issue. They don't get reimbursed, so they, and so they just don't carry it to give it to the 60 to 65-year-olds. Let some of the practicing physicians comment on that, but that's been what I've heard from family physicians.
Dr. Kemp.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a pediatrician, so I'm in a great position to come. No, but we've done several national surveys about this, and the cost and payment issues are huge here. I mean, people are not stocking it because they don't they don't have that portal to get into the pharmacy thing. They're not able to do that. Sometimes they're sending their patients to the pharmacy. They don't make it there. I mean, it's the economics of this, I think, are huge from what we hear.
Can I just, one comment about that? It's true that there are a lot of barriers to getting the vaccine, but I think one of the fundamental, well, first of all, as we've said, the first few years after introduction of the vaccine, there have been supply issues, but now we know that those have been resolved at least in the last year and a half or so. But I think that some of the studies have shown that a lot of people are still not aware of their risk of zoster, and you've probably seen the commercials on television that are promoting, or at least trying to raise awareness of the disease, and I think that is helping to educate people of their risk of zoster. And I don't know if Eddie, if you want to comment on that.
I don't want to, sorry, I want to make a comment before
Okay.
I forget about the fact of uptake. The 60 to 64 population, where they're covered by commercial insurance, the uptake is pretty good because it's first dollar coverage. It's when you get into the Medicare population that you really begin to have problems. It's a pharmacy benefit. Half our vaccine is given in the pharmacies these days. And frankly, if you look at issues like copay, for example, Medicare Part D, depending on the benefit design you have and based on the plan that you have, you may have higher or low copay. You may be, your deductible may be different. You may be whether it's January or December may impact on what you might get charged. But we have data that shows that if your copay is less than 50, you're more likely to get vaccinated than if your copay is over 50. And we see that by looking at claims reversals in the pharmacy where people get a script, they go in, then they find out how much it's going to cost them and they decide, no, I don't want the vaccine. So Medicare Part D is a real barrier to vaccination. And the other point I wanted to make was about more data coming in terms of durability. Just want to point out to people the vaccine was first licensed in 2006 for the 60 and over population. We didn't, because of supply constraints, we didn't really get going with providing vaccine to the marketplace for several years with unconstrained supply beginning really in 2012. And so that looking at durability in an observational study like in an HMO, where data lags, because it's a database study, it lags behind for a couple of years, and when you have data, you're not going to really see good observational data on durability in the 60 and over population for several years yet. And then if you're talking about the 50 to 59 population, where that indication wasn't approved until 2011, where you don't have a recommendation for 50 to 59, so there's not a lot of vaccination going on in that population, you're not going to see durability data in that population for past 2020 as a year. And, essentially, except for the US and Canada, the vaccine hasn't, just recently we began to go globally. So the durability data based on observational data is not coming anytime soon because there are no other studies that are going on except for what Merck is conducting, which is going to take a long time. And I don't know if I answered what was your question again? Sorry.
Related to the marketing campaign and raising public awareness.
Yeah. So we did that in 2012. In fact, whole team came down here to the CDC at the beginning of that year. Before we launched the campaign, we actually presented it to the work group so that everybody knew what we were going to be doing. And you've had what you show preliminary data from NHIS data was a 20% uptake in the 60 and over population. That's not 60 to 70, but 60 and over population with a healthy people target of 30% uptake, Healthy People 2020 target. And despite a very intensive campaign, which did show a good response in terms of uptake, that preliminary data on that surveillance data basically shows only a 20% uptake. So part of it has to do with the financial barriers. Part of it has to do with physicians not assessing the patients for their risk. Part of it is due when they do assess them, maybe not making a strong recommendation, and that statement about certainly in the 50 to 59 population will reduce that recommendation. And finally, patients decide, at the end of the day, doctors only advise patients what to do. They don't really order them what to do, and they have to make that decision. And very often it's a pocketbook decision.
Dr. Karen.
So I'm with Allie. I'm a pediatrician. Maybe I should be just disqualified from commenting, but I'm really sort of troubled. It goes to this issue of durability, and I'm really troubled to think that we are saying we only have one shot at this. 50 to 59 is the same as 60 to 69, and the durability of antibody won't be long enough. What is the evidence that cohort is the same as a 10-year-older cohort, and that in fact you might not get higher antibody titers and better persistence if you actually vaccinate younger?
Dr. Schuchat.
Yeah, I think we've had such an interesting day with lots of contrasting data reviews and recommendation considerations. It sounds like the industry is looking at revaccination. One thing to remember about this disease, unlike everything else that we vaccinate against, we're vaccinating against reactivation. We're not vaccinating against infection. And so while there's a lot of immunologic data that people might look at, I think it would be very helpful to know what the clinical protection against disease is for a reactivation disease with a revaccination. If we knew that another dose at a particular age would give protection, I just don't think we can assume it's the same thing as what we know from the first vaccination. And if the company will pursue that kind of testing, it would be very easy for the committee to review data that would be about multiple vaccinations. At this point, with the evidence base, as I understand it, the working group looked pretty, they really did limit their consideration to if we have a single vaccination to give, ought we lower the age, ought we keep it where we are, or should we even consider increasing it? So I think that it sounds like for this particular one, there might be more data forthcoming that would help.
If I could just respond to the issue of antibody response. Ken may remember, I don't remember exactly what the antibody response was in the 50 to 59 group versus the older group, but the geometric mean fold rise was a little bit higher. You were talking about maybe 1.7 in the 16 over population and 2.1 in the 50 to 59. Not exactly, but it's close enough. It was definitely a higher from baseline to 6 weeks post-vaccination. The issue of revaccination in doing an efficacy trial for revaccination is just prohibitive. It's not possible. We had 38,000 people in the shingles prevention study. So 60 and over, and that's why we basically limited ourselves to basically do an immunogenicity and safety study with this booster trial that's ongoing. And that's only a few hundred people in that trial. To do an efficacy trial on that, you'd have to have a lot of people, and many of them, because they're elderly, would probably be dropouts because simple fact that they would die of some competing disease. So it's not really feasible to do an efficacy trial in an older population of individuals who were first vaccinated when they were 60.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I see none. I know that everybody would like to stay here and keep discussion going on. I have a deal. Dr. Wexler, I think you're the only person who's set up for a public comment. You can do it now, or I will give you the deal to do it tomorrow morning before we get started with the general session during our period for unfinished business when everybody's fresh and eager to listen to your words.
No, we're eager now.
With that, okay, so I think we stand adjourned for the day. Thank you very much.